designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate. Live from Colorado and Virginia, you are watching the Kyle Malnati Show here on YouTube. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and thank you so much for taking a look at our show today. I'm with Austin Bergman and Heather Valentine of Valentine Properties. They're married and they've been in real estate business. Actually, they've been brokers for a number of years, but started their company in 2008. They own a couple of rental properties. And Austin and Heather, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
So what's your real estate story specific to real estate investing? Why did you decide to buy rental property? And tell us just that journey as you were looking at buying rental property.
Well, I wanted to get the brokerage set up first. So once that was done, I just said, Heather, they're going to fall in our laps. So we just waited until there was a guy getting a divorce, and he had a couple of them in a nice little part of town. And Heather went on a listing appointment, and she called me immediately and said, we should buy this house. And so we bought the first single family through him. And it's right there next to the attorney we use, so we knew the area pretty well. And then we also own an apartment building with 8 garages on it. So that one kind of was listed, and then I guess we kind of knew the area. Richmond's got a bunch of college, it's got VCU in it. So, I mean, we just kind of got to know the area, and that's how we picked up that one.
Awesome. So next question I have is that a lot of the guests that I've had on this show really have leaned on mentors, and they feel like mentors have absolutely guided them on their journey to success. So, and they feel like that's crucial in real estate investing. Have mentors contributed to your success, specifically in real estate investing, but then also in your brokerage?
Yeah, Brian Buffini is a friend of mine. It's kind of funny because I spurred a little conversation with him through email, and he would rather have a one-on-one conversation with me. So we talked for a good 2.5 hours, I think, one day on how he started with what he did to what he is today with all the, I guess, not storage units, but strip malls that he owns today. And he told me his entire story. So he's been a real big part of it. Grant Cardone is also the whole financing in with that end of it. I mean, he's another good one. And, just go with your gut. I have Heather here with me. I mean, I don't buy anything unless she gives me the green light, because I have been known to buy things that just don't work out when I don't get the green light.
You actually needed me a bit on the last one because you would have chickened out of it.
I had my limit, and she was like, no, let's go a little bit higher.
And his limit didn't make sense. It's like,
so Heather, mentors for you, how have mentors helped you in your career as both a real estate investor as well as a real estate broker?
Real estate investing, I haven't really had any mentors. I just kind of see what makes sense, run numbers, things like that. But in general, in all of life, I think it's important to have mentors. I think it's always good to find people that are further along in the journey than you are, and make sure that where they are is where you want to end up, and really get to know them as a person, both personally and professionally, to see if it makes sense for you to follow the same path. And if so, if that feels like the right thing to you, then, ask them questions, get to know them, see what their advice would be, see what mistakes they made that were, something they wouldn't do again, and see which mistakes that they really learned a lesson from, so you don't have to repeat the same thing. So I always look for whoever's been further along in the journey.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal advice, and it's so true. And it's one of the reasons why I do this podcast is that why reinvent the wheel? Why get to a point where you feel like you're trying everything for the first time? There's so many people who've done it well, they've done it successfully, and their advice can help you really avoid a bunch of pitfalls that a lot of people get into. My next question for you is, I think legacy is so important in real estate investing. What I have found is that most of my clients buy real estate for a couple of reasons. One, usually they start thinking of their kids to fund college education. 2, to fund their own retirement. And then 3, wealth and real estate specifically is a great way to transfer wealth onto the next generation and have your heirs have an opportunity to live a better life than even you've lived. And so what type of legacy do you hope to leave as you look at real estate investing, but just also being business owners?
Start. All right, so I would say as business owners, I want a brand of a brokerage that I feel like would be appropriate and my children would be proud to take on. I don't think that they have to take it on, but I think that it should be something that they would be proud to take on. I also want any of the children of any of our agents to be proud that their mom or dad works here. Like, I think that's super important. And then also, I think as far as investing goes, you know, it makes sense for us as real estate agents because we understand it. And I think you should only invest in things that you understand or things that you know or things that you personally use. So I think that, you know, we have great opportunities to see great potential. And obviously we don't have normal jobs where you have like a 401k or anything like that. Typically, I mean, we have 401k, let's split our thing. But so it's a great way for us to save for retirement, save for our future, and also, you know, do things in the long term. So we don't buy every single property we see, obviously. I think a lot of people have way too much debt in real estate. So I think it makes sense that you are strategic about how you purchase it so that it makes sense for the long term, and you better be able to pay every single payment in that building. Otherwise you don't belong in it.
I love that. I love that answer. How about you, Austin? Legacy for you?
Well, it's going to go down on my kids. You know, I mean, I grew up in a household where my dad was a trim carpenter. There was maybe 60 grand a year. I throughout my life watched financial problems with IRS, bankruptcy, foreclosure, repossessed cars, and my kids are just never going to see any of that. It's just my whole gut in life is to not let them live what I grew up with. And I'm a bitch scratch and claw just to be able to not allow that to happen.
I love that. You know, I grew up in a household that had some real world money problems, especially during the recession, but then also just a lot of different things that happened. And that marked me as I grew up, and I saw that. And when you see, you know, phone calls from collectors and things of that sort, I made that decision right away. Never again. That's not going to happen to me. And that's tough because you, as a real estate agent and also as a real estate investor, you see other people doing things and you're like, man, I know that they're doing it because they're over leveraging themselves or they're doing these different things. And I love the old Aesop's fable, the tortoise and the hare. You know, the tortoise always wins. The slow and methodical always wins the race. He may not get there, you know, looking as flashy as the hare, but he ends up winning in the end. So I think that's great advice. Next question, and Austin, I'm going to have you kick this one off because we talked about it as we were prepping for the show. I believe that leaders are readers. What nonfiction book is your favorite, specifically business book, if you've got one, and what makes it special to you?
The Tortoise and the Hare.
Nice.
That was my book.
No, just off the bat, I mean, you got to know numbers, period. I don't care if you're in real estate or in business or combine the two. Anything with Dave Ramsey, because he gets the business, he was in the business, he understands the business. I've also really like Grant Cardone's Millionaire Mindset. It is a quick read, but it is dead on every darn thing you need to do if you want a 7-figure net worth. I mean, it's just the simplest stuff in the world, and do it. I mean,
But they totally contradict themselves.
They totally contradict themselves.
Or not themselves, they contradict each other.
But,
yeah.
I mean, have you read it yet?
No, I haven't, but I know Dave Ramsey's stuff, and I know that Grant Cardone would definitely contradict it.
I think those two, I mean, and anything Brian, I mean, I love Brian Buffini, but if you were to do those two, it'd be those two. How
about you, Heather?
So I'm going to be honest, I am not a real big reader. I'm more of like a visual conference type of learner. A lot of other people read things, and then I listen to what they tell me if I trust them. Maybe mentor first. But I have read a couple of books that I like. I do really like Dave Ramsey. I think that I don't think you need to be completely debt-free in real estate investing, but I do think you need to be very strategic about the debt you are taking. I think Grant Cardone is way too leveraged in his philosophy, but I do think, you know, some of his mindsets would make sense as far as, you know, how you would purchase real estate. And then also, so I would say The Total Money Makeover would be a really good book. And also, there's another book that I read that I don't remember what it was. I really liked it. If I remember, I'll tell you later.
Total Money Makeover is a phenomenal book. Absolutely changed my life when I read it in 2012, and I went on a debt-free journey, and I completely agree with you. I think it's an awesome book, and I've got to read some of the Buffini books because I haven't read much of that, and so I'll make sure to do that. And Austin and Heather, couple of things that I want to make sure that I talk to you about as we talk about real estate brokerage success and being a successful realtor is that, I personally think that a lot of people get bent out of shape when they make mistakes. And I personally felt this way, especially in the beginning of my career, where I kind of personally wore my failures. And so as you experienced more and more success, how did you learn that failure was okay? And also, how did you learn how to move past failure, which I think is probably the most important thing. So Heather, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on just failing and growing as you're achieving?
Well, one of the things I would say is that without failure, you can't figure out what you want and what you don't want. So I think that when I've failed at things, I've realized either why I didn't want them or why I wanted them more. So it either made me realize, thank God I didn't get that, or, okay, I want this more, I need to work harder for it. How is being a business owner deal with failure differently? I would say it's super frustrating at first, like when other people do things that makes you fail, because it's out of your control and you want to try to control everything. But you have to learn that when you let go of those things and you teach people correctly and, give them the opportunity to learn from it, that you can get further in business. And then personally, how I handle and manage failure is I learned that most of the times when I failed, most of the time when I failed, I realized I probably didn't want it or need it in my life anyways. So I've realized that, if I don't get a listing, for example, I may not have wanted that listing. I'll see that it sat on the market for 6 months because they didn't listen to me and they went with somebody else. So that failure was a blessing because sometimes they come back and list with me anyways. So I've learned that it wasn't meant for my life to be at that time. And then how I manage failure as far as other people is I've learned that I need to communicate it with them very clearly and express why that didn't work, and then, help them or encourage them to get over it and move on and not make the same mistake again, basically it.
How about you, Austin?
I just think you're going to fail. It's real estate. When you get it, nobody really teaches it to start out with. There's going to be things, but learn from it and sit there. And one of the things I did in the beginning was journal about all of my lovely failures and why it happened, and sit there and think about it. So when it comes up again, you're not sitting here going, well, it happened to me again. It's just, you have to learn from these things. And, Heather and I have talked about it. A real estate agent that's been doing this for 30 some years has seen it all pretty much. And it's like, that's why experience pays, and with the agents that I have now, I teach them every Thursday from 12 to 2. And if something happens throughout my life today in business, we sit there and break it down and talk about it. And if it happens, it's like Heather said, if you lose a listing, why did you lose it? Let's go back and backtrack. And I used to have Heather, it's kind of funny, back in the day when she lost them, I would have her call the other agent or call the sellers and actually ask why she lost it. So then you could sit there and, I guess, dissect it before you go on a listing appointment again.
I still call the sellers to ask them. I don't get it.
But that's rare.
I think that's great advice, and something that I used to do as well is if someone doesn't choose to hire you, just to ask them very humbly, hey, I get it. You chose to hire someone else. Is there anything I could do to make my presentation better the next time? Is there anything I could do to, help win your business the next time? And it's funny how that stuff rolls back around to you. And Heather, I enjoyed what you had commented about, just with your mentality as you approach different jobs. And I think a lot of times when we fail, we're either unprepared or we're not giving it our all at times. And then Austin, your comment about writing yourself a report, I heard this from a coaching program that I'm a part of, that when you sit down and you write, it actually takes your mind to a different place, and you actually very often work through the problem much quicker when you sit and write and journal about something. So as humbling an experience that is probably very helpful to you. And I think that's really smart that you both approach making mistakes that way, and just realizing it's part of the journey, right?
And if you go back to a journal from 10 years ago, you're dying laughing about what you had screwed up on. You're like, really? That was really a problem then?
All right. So, Austin, we'll start this next question with you. As company leaders, I feel like it's oftentimes harder to allow others that work with you to fail. I think for entrepreneurs and for hard charging business people, we understand that failure is a part of it, and we get it pretty quickly, dust ourselves off and move on. But talk to me a little bit about how you coach some of the people that you work with through failure, and how do you handle failure when maybe it's something that blows up and it causes a problem for you?
The only one that going back to me is an agent. He just went on 3 listing appointments on a neighborhood that is literally across from the office, and he lost every single one. And I'm just like, all right, let's go through what you're saying. Let's go through your pricing on all of them, and let's figure out why these people. And he's on the younger end of it, and I could say he comes from a proper way of talking to people, where it's yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And I told him, you got to quit that. You are now in business, and you're not going in there and being a kid anymore. You were there to help people sell their house. And I mean, literally, you have to break it down with people. And I don't like losing. I'm very competitive. And it's just when I have these agents, I'd like to see them all compete to win, I guess, you know?
Yeah. Heather, how about you? You know, when interacting with other people that work on your team, how do you help them? How do you coach them through mistakes that they might make or failures that they have?
They get spanking. So this has developed over the years that we've had people work with us. I remember one of our first big mistakes, one of our assistant put in the MLS that it had a heat pump, and it did not. It had oil heat, which is obviously a huge difference and a huge difference in the expense. And so we call it, I think, what was it, $10,000?
It's about 10 grand.
So $10,000, which I paid because I was obviously the one advertising as a heat pump, and it was the oil tank. And so we tried to not have $10,000 mistakes is what we joke around about. It's like, we want to, you know, obviously mistakes are going to happen. We just want them to not be $10,000 mistakes. We don't want them to be such bad mistakes that the client gets pissed off and fires us. We don't want it to be huge mistakes. We want to catch our little mistakes first so that we can grow from them and learn from them. So at the beginning, we started having like weekly meetings with our team and our staff that works with Justin and Austin directly. So we have one weekly meeting with our team and our staff, and then we have one weekly meeting with all of our agents. And then I have a daily phone call each morning with all of our staff, so we can talk about anything that happened the day before, anything we need to talk about for that day, anything that needs to be addressed. So I think it's just like the constant communication and, you know, helping them understand that when they make a mistake, just fess up to it real quick so we try to fix it. Try to, you know, find the mistakes before I find them is one of the other goals we have. And things are going to happen. As long as you have $10,000 mistakes, we should all survive. Yeah.
I think that's great. Touching, Heather, on communication is something that as a business owner and as a leader on my team, that's something we work on a lot. And that it's hard. You have to commit to communicate, and you have to commit to spending a lot of time. But I feel like at least everybody knows where you stand. So I think that is something that can be real difficult. And Austin, I liked your answer as well, where, you know, really slowing things down, doing a little bit of film study, if you will, to use a sports example. If someone's not, you know, hitting their sales objectives and they're asking you for help on it, best thing to do is say, hey, you know, let's role play this. Let's go through it. Why isn't this working out? And maybe try a different approach to it. So I think both great pieces of advice. So this next question actually comes from me. So one of the things I'm really passionate about is understanding, especially when we get into our 30s and 40s, this idea of dear younger me. You're writing a letter to yourself when you were 22. And if you could impart some wisdom on yourself, what would you say to yourself in the younger version? So what would you say? And Austin, I'll start with you and then we'll go to Heather.
What, are you scared of my answer?
But no,
I'm just trying to be equitable.
Honest to everybody, real estate came naturally to Heather and I. I mean, out the gate, we were making a couple $100,000 a year. And if I go back to my early 21, I mean, we were what, 20?
We're 21.
20, I would have saved more money. I really would have saved more money and not looked at the dog and pony show of what this business looks like. We were known to be the dumb rear end people that ended up on a Lincoln dealership and walked out of there with a $975 car payment because all of their agents were doing it. And that's what, if I could go back and write myself a note, I would have left that damn car there and I would have saved more money.
I love that answer. Heather, I'm not scared of your answer, but I want to hear it.
So I would look at myself and say, you're amazing. You're perfect. Okay.
You're so humble.
So I would say that, you know, and I was just kidding about the nothing, but I think that I had all those experiences because it taught me what not to do. I mean, I survived them all. Some of them I was like, you know, knee deep in shit getting through them. But like, you know, when the $975 a month card payment when the recession hit really taught us like, hey, we don't want these payments. Like, we don't want those debt. And if I hadn't realized that then, I might have then, when I wanted to open my brokerage, gone and financed a building or rented some location. And we chose not to do that because we knew what it was like before when we really had, major financial problems. The only thing I probably would say is the IRS is like, oh, you didn't pay that, $500 payment. Now you have a $1,000 penalty. And it's like, oh my gosh, when am I ever going to get around this goal? And I would just say, I also, whenever you're starting in this career, there's so many different ways to do real estate. We personally choose to run our business by referral. I don't know that that's for everybody because everyone has different personalities, but I would say pick what works for you and stick with it. Like if it goes with you to cold call people, then just do that. Don't try to, be the octopus that does all this random stuff to try to get business. Like do what you're really good at, be passionate about it, you're the best person for it. That's what I would say.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I think your last piece of advice there is huge. It's something I even need to hear because at times we get distracted from what we're naturally good at. And so you need to be reminded that just stick with what you're good at. And the debt-free journey, saving your money, I mean, that is something absolutely, I think for a lot of the people like ourselves that were real estate agents through the recession, that's something that you learn. And that's a lesson that stings. And I know what you mean about the IRS. I've been there as well. So I try to keep them out of my day-to-day life for sure.
Letters.
Yeah. So finally, last question of the show, it's a question I always end every show with is what advice would you give to aspiring investors? And we talked a little bit about advice, so I imagine that I know what you guys might say, but what advice would you give to an aspiring investor? Someone's maybe shaking in their boots. Maybe they're actually a client of yours in your real estate company. And they're like, guys, what should I do? What type of property should I buy? How do I buy my first rental property? What advice would you give? And Austin, I'll have you start it.
Nothing should be flipped but a hamburger.
There you go. I love it.
You should never get into flipping houses. It is like crack. You make a little bit of money, you come back for it, and eventually you will lose all that you have made. There's just a proven system. I don't care what HGTV show you think you are going to watch. You need income producing property and you need to finance them 25 to 30% down, 15-year notes. And if you cannot afford to do that, you have absolutely no business buying them. And you need to have some buck in the bank because stuff's gonna happen. AC units are gonna go out. You're gonna have to evict tenants. You're gonna have, my biggest thing now is all these garage doors need to be replaced. And it's one thing after another.
Yeah, emergency funds are a huge thing in real estate. And in business, we call it retained earnings, right? Having that rainy day fund that you can use to replace your furnace or water heater or roof, whatever happens. Or you get a tenant that unfortunately trashes your property and you've got to evict them. And all of a sudden, how are you going to change all of the fixtures out in the unit and make it rent ready? You've got to have some capital to do that. Heather, how about you? What advice would you give to an aspiring investor?
So I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there. So just like you wouldn't perform your own surgery, I would not recommend you going on, like after watching a TV show, and not recommend like watching TV shows and going to invest in real estate. That happens all the time. I get calls on it all the time. I literally talk clients out of to start investing because it doesn't make sense for them. You definitely should not be financing the money to put down on the finance property to then finance the renovation. It doesn't make any sense. Like it's way too much leverage. You're going to get yourself in a big old hole. And then one of my favorite questions to always ask people is, are you buying this for leverage? Or are you buying this for long-term or short-term? And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, well, are you buying this for, steady income every single month? Or are you buying this for appreciation? And one of the first ways I can tell if somebody has no clue about investing is that they'll say, well, I want both. Well, you should, maybe it's great that you get both. That's the ideal situation. But you should either buy it for the long-term gains of the rental income, or you should be buying it for the short-term appreciation. But you can't expect to get the rental income with the short-term appreciation all the time. So I think a lot of people make that mistake of thinking that they'll just make, strike it rich with buying real estate in investment purposes. And yes, you can over the long term. And yeah, you can flip properties and make money. And some people are very good at it, but I feel like the flippers who have been very successful in the long term with flipping properties have a lot more cash. They're not financing these properties for long periods of time. to flip them. You know, they might finance one or two, but in the long term, they're paying cash for them, flipping them, and know that they may lose money, and they have the ability, if they had to lose money. A lot of people who flip properties end up working at hamburger joints because that's what they should have been flipping in the first place, but that's another story.
You're so right. One of the guests that we had previously on the show is a client of mine here in Denver. His name's Josh Mullins, and Josh said there's a big difference between a speculator and an investor. And I think a lot of people confuse speculation with investing. Property flipping as well as stock trading, that's speculation. That's hoping that you're going to be able to get on the right side of the market, make a quick buck. And when you're investing, you're doing it for long term, and you both have said that. So I love your answer. I think it's great. So you both had mentioned Dave Ramsey. I always end the show with a quote. And the quote that I'd love to share with you today is actually from Dave Ramsey's business book, which is called EntreLeadership. I'm a part of that program, which is a coaching program. And Dave has coined this term, the momentum theorem. And what he says is that focused intensity over time multiplied by God equals unstoppable momentum. And that's a quote that's really inherently about persistence and perseverance and learning through failure and being intense. And I think as business owners and real estate investors, those are the things that I see in both of you as I'm talking to you. So I think it's a great quote to end the show. One of the things I'd love to say, of course, is thank you so much, Austin and Heather. This is a great opportunity to mastermind with you and talk with you over video chat while you're in Virginia and I'm in Colorado. So thank you, all of our guests, for watching the show. We wouldn't be able to have this show, obviously, without you. And as I love to say, we will see you around the neighborhood.